The wind howled across the surface of Viridian 7, carrying red dust that scratched against the colony's reinforced windows. Day 1 stood in the maintenance bay, checking the seals on the lower tunnels. He worked alone as he always did. The tall human preferred it that way. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, testing each lock and recording the pressure readings on his datapad. Above him, the mining colony buzzed with activity. Different species moved through the corridors, their voices mixing into a constant hum. Viridian 7 was home to nearly 300 workers from a dozen different worlds. The humans were the newest additions, arriving only 2 cycles ago. Most of the other species still regarded them with curiosity and a hint of distrust. Day 1 understood. Humans had a reputation in the outer colonies. They were said to be cold, focused only on their work, distant from the communal bonds that other species valued. He supposed the reputation fit him well enough. He kept to his quarters when off shift, ate his meals alone, and spoke only when necessary. In the processing facility 3 levels up, Velthrak supervised the mineral sorting operation. The avian alien's feathers were a deep blue, marking him as a mature member of his species. His large eyes constantly scanned the work floor, ensuring everything ran smoothly. But today, part of his attention remained elsewhere. His 3 hatchlings were at the learning center, and the weather reports were growing concerning. The storms on Viridian 7 were legendary. They came without much warning, bringing winds that could tear metal and electrical interference that fried unprotected equipment. This one had been building on the horizon for days, a dark wall of clouds that grew larger each morning. Yuri, the human colony administrator, called an emergency meeting as the shift change approached. Representatives from each species gathered in the main conference room. She stood at the head of the table, her expression serious. "The storm will hit within 6 hours," she said, pointing to the holographic display. "All personnel need to be in designated shelter zones. We're implementing full lockdown protocols." Crix, the insectoid security chief, clicked his mandibles in agreement. "My teams will do a final sweep of all sections. Everyone must be accounted for." The meeting dispersed quickly. Workers hurried to finish their tasks and reach their assigned shelter areas. The colony's warning sirens began their low pulsing wail. Children were collected from the learning center, families gathered in the residential wings, and emergency supplies were distributed. Vel left his post and headed toward the learning center. His taloned feet clicked rapidly on the metal floor. The 3 hatchlings should be waiting for him there. Pip, Trill, and Ski were young, barely old enough to attend group learning. They were curious and energetic, always exploring and asking questions. When Vel arrived at the learning center, chaos greeted him. Younglings of various species were being claimed by their parents or guardians. The instructor, a gentle reptilian named Cess, was checking names off her list. She looked up as Vel approached. "Have you seen my hatchlings?" Vel asked, his head crest rising with concern. Cess checked her datapad, her expression troubled. "They were here during the midday meal. But when I called for assembly, they didn't respond. I thought perhaps you had already collected them." Vel's blood ran cold. "No, I just arrived." They searched the learning center together, calling the hatchlings names. Other parents helped, looking in storage closets and behind furniture. The small beings were nowhere to be found. They were talking about the observation dome earlier. One of the other younglings volunteered. They wanted to see the storm coming. The observation dome was in the hab ring, 2 sections away from the learning center. Vel rushed there, his heart pounding. The dome was empty except for a few adults securing equipment. No one had seen 3 small avian hatchlings. By now, the wind outside was beginning to pick up. The colony's outer hull groaned under the pressure. Yuri's voice came over the intercom, ordering all personnel to shelter immediately. Vel returned to the main corridor, calling for his children. Other workers helped him search, but the areas were emptying quickly. Everyone needed to reach the shelter zones. Crix arrived with his security team, their sensors sweeping for small life signs. "We'll find them," Crix assured Vel, though his antennae drooped with concern. "But we must search quickly." Day 1 heard the commotion from the lower maintenance level. He had just finished his checks and was preparing to head to his assigned shelter. His datapad showed a message about missing hatchlings, colony-wide search in progress. He paused, considering. Then he noticed something on his status board. A breach alert in Tunnel 7, just below his current position. It was a small alert, easily missed in the chaos of the storm preparations. The tunnel connected to the old mining shafts, sections that had been sealed years ago. The access points were small, meant for maintenance robots, or for small beings trying to play explore. Daewon stood still for a moment, weighing his options. The storm was coming. Protocol required him to report to shelter, but if those hatchlings had somehow gotten into the old tunnels, they were in serious danger. The temperature down there would drop rapidly. The electromagnetic pulses from the storm would cause disorientation. Avian species were particularly vulnerable to both. He made his decision. Gathering supplies from the maintenance locker, Daewon filled a pack with thermal blankets, a portable heater, food synthesizer packets, and extra power cells for his light. He grabbed a spare thermal jacket and rope. His emergency beacon went on his belt. The breach point was behind a service panel that required a security code. Daewon had the code as part of his maintenance duties. He opened the panel and stared into the dark tunnel beyond. It was barely wide enough for him to crawl through. Most of the other species in the colony would never fit. Above him, he could hear Vel's desperate calls echoing through the corridors. The avian's distress was painful to hear. In Vel's species, losing hatchlings was considered the greatest possible failure. The shame and grief would mark him for life. Daewon activated his comm. "This is Daewon in Maintenance Section 12. I'm investigating a possible breach in Tunnel 7. There may be a connection to the missing hatchlings." Yuri's voice crackled back immediately. "Daewon, the storm is minutes away. Report to shelter now." "Understood," he replied. Then he switched off his comm and entered the tunnel. The passage was cold and dark. His light beam cut through the blackness, revealing smooth rock walls and the occasional support beam. The tunnel sloped downward, taking him deeper into the colony's foundation. He moved carefully, looking for any sign of the hatchlings. After 50 meters, he found it. A small piece of torn fabric, bright yellow, caught on a rough edge of rock. It matched the vests that Learning Center students wore. Daewon picked it up carefully and continued forward. The tunnel opened into a junction with the old mining shafts. These passages were larger but unstable. Warning signs hung on chains, faded and covered in dust. The air was colder here, and he could feel the vibrations as the storm began to hit the surface far above. Somewhere in this darkness, 3 small hatchlings were lost and alone. Daewon adjusted his pack and moved deeper into the abandoned mines. Behind him, the access panel sealed automatically as the colony entered full lockdown. He was committed now. Find the hatchlings, or they would all face the storm together in the deep places beneath the ground. The storm hit Viridian 7 with the force of a hammer. Wind speeds reached 300 kilometers per hour within minutes. Electromagnetic pulses rippled through the atmosphere, causing displays to flicker throughout the colony. In the designated shelter zones, personnel huddled together waiting for the fury to pass. Vel sat in Shelter Zone 3, surrounded by his colleagues, but completely alone in his grief. His feathers were flat against his body, a sign of extreme distress in his species. Other avians sat nearby offering quiet comfort, but nothing could ease the pain of not knowing where his hatchlings were. "We will find them when the storm passes," Seth said softly, placing a gentle hand on his wing. "They are clever younglings. They will have found shelter," but Vel knew better. Hatchlings their age had no experience with real danger. They would be terrified, cold, and calling for him. The thought of them crying out in fear while he sat safe in the shelter was unbearable. Crix moved through the shelter zones, checking on everyone and ensuring the seals held. His security team reported that all personnel were accounted for except one. Daewon, the human maintenance engineer, had not reported to his assigned shelter. He sent a message about investigating Tunnel 7, one of the security officers reported. Then his comm went dark. Yuri pulled up the maintenance schematics on her datapad, her face growing pale. "Tunnel 7 connects to the old mining network. Those shafts were sealed because they're unstable. Can we reach him?" Crix asked. She shook her head. "Not until the storm passes. The electromagnetic interference is too strong. Even our hardened systems are barely functioning." Crix shared this information with Vel. The avian looked up, confusion mixing with his grief. "The human went into the old mines. Why would he do that?" "He said he thought the hatchlings might be there," Crix replied. Vel's eyes widened. In his species, risking one's life for another's offspring was the highest form of honor. But humans were supposed to be cold and uncaring. Everyone said so. They didn't involve themselves in other species' affairs, especially not matters of family. "I don't understand," Vel whispered. "He barely knows me. He's never even spoken to my hatchlings. An older avian sitting nearby Grandmother Cree made a thoughtful sound. Perhaps we don't know humans as well as we think. Deep in the tunnels, Daewon pressed forward through the darkness. The storm's effects were reaching even this far down. Rocks shook loose from the ceiling, clattering to the ground. His light flickered as electromagnetic pulses washed through the area. The temperature was dropping steadily. He found more signs of the hatchlings. Small claw marks on the walls where tiny hands had gripped for balance. A dropped snack wrapper from the learning center. They had definitely come this way. But how long ago? And where were they now? The tunnel branched in 3 directions. Daewon stopped, playing his light down each passage. He needed to choose carefully. The wrong choice could mean hours of wasted time that the hatchlings didn't have. He closed his eyes and listened. The storm roared above, but beneath that sound he thought he heard something else. A faint chirping noise, almost like a bird's call. It came from the left passage. Moving as quickly as he dared, Daewon followed the sound. This tunnel was narrower than the others, and the ceiling was lower. He had to duck his head to avoid the support beams. Water dripped from somewhere above, forming small puddles on the floor. The chirping grew louder. It was definitely a distress call, the sound young avians made when frightened or in danger. Daewon increased his pace, his boots splashing through the puddles. A deep rumble echoed through the tunnel. Ahead of him, rocks shifted and fell. Dust filled the air, making him cough. When it cleared, he saw that part of the tunnel had collapsed, blocking his path forward. The chirping sounds came from beyond the rubble. "Hello?" Daewon called out. "Can anyone hear me?" For a moment, silence. Then a small, frightened voice answered. "Who's there?" "My name is Daewon. I'm from the colony. Are you the hatchlings from the learning center?" "Yes." The voice was young, speaking the common language with a child's accent. "We're stuck. There are 3 of us." Relief flooded through Daewon. They were alive. "Are any of you hurt?" "Ski is very cold. She won't wake up properly. That was bad. Hypothermia was setting in." Daewon examined the collapsed section. It wasn't completely blocked. There was a gap near the top, just large enough for him to squeeze through if he left his pack behind. "I'm coming to you," he called. "Stay where you are and keep talking to me so I can find you." He tied a rope to his pack and pushed it ahead through the gap. Then he began to climb over the rubble. Sharp rocks scraped his hands and caught on his clothes. The gap was tighter than he'd thought. For a terrifying moment he was stuck, unable to move forward or back. Then with a hard pull he squeezed through and tumbled down the other side. His light had fallen during the climb. He fumbled in the darkness until his hands found it. The beam was cracked but still working. He pointed it down the tunnel and saw 3 small figures huddled against the far wall. The hatchlings were tiny, barely reaching his knee height. Their feathers were dulled with dust and their large eyes reflected his light with fear. 2 of them pressed protectively around the third, who lay still on the cold ground. Daewon approached slowly, making himself as small as possible. "It's okay. I'm here to help." The larger of the 2 conscious hatchlings, Pip, stepped forward bravely despite his obvious fear. "Are you really from the colony?" "You're very big. I'm human. We're a bit bigger than your species." Daewon knelt down, bringing himself closer to their level. "This is Ski?" He gestured to the still hatchling. Trill, who had been stroking her sister's feathers, nodded. "She got cold and stopped talking a while ago." Daewon gently touched Ski's neck, feeling for a pulse. It was there, but weak and slow. He needed to warm her up immediately. He pulled the thermal blankets from his pack and wrapped one around Ski, then pulled off his own thermal jacket and bundled her inside it. The small body was frighteningly cold. "Come here," he said to the other 2 hatchlings. "We need to share warmth." Pip and Trill hesitated. They had never been close to a human before. Humans were unknown and therefore dangerous. But they were also cold and scared, and this strange being was offering help. Slowly they moved closer. Daewon wrapped them in blankets and activated the portable heater, setting it in the center of their small group. He held Ski against his chest, using his own body heat to warm the little one. "What were you doing down here?" he asked gently. Pip looked ashamed. "We wanted to be explorers, like in the stories. We found the small tunnel and thought it would be an adventure. Then we got lost," Trill added quietly, "and the storm came and everything got scary." Daewon pulled the rope attached to his pack, bringing it closer. He found the food synthesizer packets and offered them to Pip and Trill. They ate hungrily, their fear gradually giving way to exhaustion. "My father will be so angry," Pip said between bites. "He'll be too happy to see you to be angry," Daewon replied. He's very worried. Against his chest, Ski stirred slightly. It was a good sign. Day1 adjusted the thermal jacket, making sure she was completely covered except for her small beak. He tried his comm again but got only static. The storm was still raging above, and now the collapse behind him had sealed them in. They weren't getting out until the storm passed and rescue teams could reach them. Day1 settled his back against the wall and checked his supplies. He had enough food and power for the heater to last perhaps 12 hours. The storm should pass before then, probably. Trill leaned against his side, exhausted. Within minutes, she was asleep. Pip tried to stay awake but soon followed his sister into sleep. The portable heater hummed quietly, creating a small bubble of warmth in the cold darkness. Day1 sat in the ancient mining tunnel, 3 alien hatchlings depending on him for survival, and waited for the storm to end. Hours passed in the cold darkness of the tunnel. The storm's fury continued unabated above ground. Even this deep, the vibrations rattled through the rock, occasionally sending small stones falling from the ceiling. Each time, Day1 pulled the hatchlings closer, shielding them with his body. Ski's condition had stabilized but remained concerning. She was breathing more regularly now, tucked warm inside his thermal jacket. Her tiny heartbeat fluttered against his chest. Every so often she would make a small sound, not quite awake but no longer unconscious. It was progress. Pip woke first, his large eyes blinking in the dim light of Day1's lamp. For a moment the hatchling seemed confused about where he was. Then memory returned and fear filled his expression. "It's all right," Day1 said quietly. "The storm is still going, but we're safe here." "How long have we been here?" Pip asked. Day1 checked his datapad. "About 5 hours since I found you." Pip looked at his sisters, then back at Day1. The young avian's head tilted in the way his species did when thinking hard about something. "Why did you come for us?" "You don't even know us. It was a fair question." Day1 considered how to answer. The truth was complicated, tangled up in memories he usually tried to forget. But something about the hatchling's direct gaze made him want to be honest. "When I was young, I had a little brother," Day1 said slowly. "He was about your age. There was an accident at the facility where our parents worked. The safety systems failed and there was a fire. My brother was in the children's area. I tried to reach him, but the doors were sealed." Pip listened with wide eyes. "What happened?" "Other people got him out. They didn't know him. They didn't know our family. But they went in anyway because he was a child who needed help." Day1 paused. "That's what people should do. Help children. Any children. It doesn't matter whose they are. Did he survive?" Day1 shook his head. "The smoke was too much. But the people who tried, they did everything they could. I've always remembered that." Trill woke up then, making a small questioning sound. She looked around in confusion, then saw Day1 and scrambled backward in fear. "It's okay, Trill," Pip said quickly. "He's helping us. His name is Day1." Trill's feathers were puffed up, making her look even smaller. "Where's Father? Where's the colony?" "The storm trapped us down here," Day1 explained gently. "But when it passes, people will come looking for us. Your father is waiting for you." "He must be so scared," Trill said, her voice breaking. Tears formed in her eyes, the clear liquid running down her small beak. Day1 offered her a food packet. "He knows people are looking. He knows that we won't give up." As Trill ate, another tremor shook the tunnel. This one was stronger than before. Dust cascaded from the ceiling and the support beam nearest to them groaned ominously. Day1 quickly moved the hatchlings away from that section, gathering them on the other side of their small shelter. The beam held, but barely. Cracks had appeared in the rock around it. "Is the tunnel going to fall down?" Pip asked, trying to sound brave but unable to hide the fear in his voice. "Not if we're lucky," Day1 said. "But we should be ready to move if we need to." He checked the rope leading back to the collapsed section he'd climbed through. If the tunnel here became unsafe, they might have to try going back that way. It would be difficult with the hatchlings, but not impossible. Ski stirred against his chest. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused and confused. "Papa," she whispered. "Your papa is waiting for you at the colony," Day1 said softly. "I'm Day1. I'm going to help you get back to him." Ski looked up at him, her small face so close to his. "You're warm. That's good." "You need to stay warm." He adjusted the jacket around her. "Are you a guardian?" Ski asked. In her species, guardians were protectors who watched over hatchlings when parents couldn't. Something like that, Daewon agreed. Pip moved closer, his earlier fear of the human fading. In the learning center, Teacher Sess told us that humans don't care about other species' children. She said humans only look after their own kind. Daewon felt a flash of anger at that, but pushed it down. It wasn't the teacher's fault. That was what many species believed about humans. The reputation had been earned through the actions of some, and now all humans carried it. Some humans are like that, he admitted. Some individuals of every species are like that. But it's not true of all humans. Where I come from, on Earth, we have a saying, "It takes a village to raise a child." It means everyone in a community helps look after all the children, not just their own. What's a village? Trill asked. It's a small community where everyone knows each other and works together, Daewon explained. Like our colony, but smaller. The Hatchlings considered this. Their species had a similar concept, the flock family, where all adults helped raise all hatchlings. It surprised them that humans might have something comparable. Another hour passed. Daewon shared out more food and water, carefully rationing their supplies. He told the hatchlings stories about Earth, about rain that fell as water instead of acid, about forests full of trees, about oceans that stretched beyond the horizon. The young avians were fascinated. They asked endless questions. What did trees feel like? How deep were the oceans? Did Earth have storms like Viridian 7? Answering their questions kept Daewon's mind off their situation. He hadn't talked this much in months. Usually he spent his off hours alone in his quarters, maintaining his carefully constructed solitude. But here, trapped in a tunnel with 3 frightened children, the walls he'd built around himself seemed less important. Why do you work so far from Earth? Pip asked during a lull in the conversation. Daewon hesitated. After my brother died, being around people was hard. Everyone knew what happened. They looked at me with pity, or they avoided me because they didn't know what to say. I wanted to go somewhere nobody knew me. That sounds lonely, Trill said quietly. It is, Daewon admitted. But I thought I wanted to be alone. Did you? Pip asked. Daewon looked down at the 3 small beings huddled around him. Ski was asleep again, breathing steadily. Trill leaned against his arm. Pip sat nearby, watching him with those large, intelligent eyes. I'm not sure anymore, he said honestly. His emergency beacon suddenly came to life, beeping softly. Daewon grabbed it, hope surging through him. The storm must be weakening if signals could get through. He activated the transmit function, sending out their location. Does that mean help is coming? Pip asked. It means they can find us now, Daewon said. We just have to wait a little longer. But even as he said it, another massive tremor shook the tunnel. This time the groaning support beam gave way. Rock crashed down behind them, filling the tunnel with dust and debris. When it cleared, their small space had become even smaller. The hatchlings cried out in fear. Daewon pulled them close, covering them with his body as more small stones fell. When everything finally settled, he checked each of them carefully. No injuries, just fear. But their situation had become more desperate. The collapse had destroyed the portable heater, and half their remaining supplies were buried under rock. The temperature would start dropping quickly now. Daewon activated his beacon again, the signal pulsing urgently into the dark. Somewhere above, people would be preparing to come for them. They just had to survive long enough to be found. He wrapped all 3 hatchlings in the remaining thermal blanket and pulled them close to share his body heat. It would have to be enough. Tell us another story about Earth, Ski whispered. Her voice weak but awake, so Daewon did, talking steadily through the cold and dark, keeping the hatchlings calm and giving them something to focus on besides their fear. His voice echoed in the small space, speaking of home and hope and help that was surely coming soon. The long hours of the night stretched endlessly in the collapsed tunnel. Daewon's datapad showed it was nearly midnight, colony standard time. The storm had been raging for almost 18 hours. His emergency beacon continued its steady pulse, but there had been no response. Either the interference was still too strong, or the rescue teams hadn't reached this section yet. The temperature had dropped significantly after the heater was destroyed. Daewon could see his breath in the dim light. The hatchlings were cold despite the thermal blanket and his shared body heat. They pressed close to him, seeking warmth. I'm hungry, Ski said quietly. She had recovered somewhat but was still weak. Daewon checked his remaining supplies. 1 food packet and half a water container. Not much, but it would have to do. He split the food packet 3 ways, making sure each hatchling got an equal share. He didn't take any for himself. "Aren't you eating?" Trill noticed. "I ate earlier," Day One lied. "You need it more than I do." Pip watched him carefully. The young avian was smart and observant. "You're giving us your food. You're growing." Growing beings need more nutrition. It wasn't entirely a lie. Besides, humans can go longer without food than your species. After they ate, the hatchlings huddled close again. The cold was becoming harder to ignore. Day One rubbed their backs and wings, trying to keep their circulation going. His own hands were growing numb, but he didn't stop. "Tell us more about your brother," Pip said suddenly. "What was he like?" Day One was surprised by the question. He rarely talked about his brother, even in his own thoughts, but something about the darkness and the situation made it easier to speak. His name was Jiho. He was 7 years old, very energetic and curious about everything. He wanted to be a pilot when he grew up. Daewon smiled at the memory. He would build spacecraft out of boxes and pretend to fly to different planets. "Like we pretended to be explorers," Trill said softly. "Yes, like that." He had a big imagination. Daewon paused. "The day of the fire I was supposed to be watching him, but I was 15 and thought I was too old to babysit. I asked a friend to cover for me so I could go do something else." The hatchlings listened quietly, sensing this was important. When the alarm went off, I ran back, but the facility was already burning. The doors were sealed to contain the fire. I could see Jiho through the window, see him calling for me, but I couldn't reach him. Daewon's voice roughened. The rescue workers went in. They carried out 12 children that day. Jiho was one of the last. They tried everything to save him, but the smoke damage was too severe. "It wasn't your fault," Pip said firmly. "The fire was the fault, not you." "My parents never blamed me," Daewon continued, "but I blamed myself. I still do. That's why I came looking for you. When I saw that breach alert and thought about you being lost down here, I couldn't not try. I couldn't let another child be alone and scared if there was something I could do." Ski reached up and touched his face with her small hand. "You're a good guardian." The simple statement from the tiny hatchling broke something inside Daewon. Tears he'd held back for years finally fell. He cried silently in the dark. The hatchlings pressed against him, offering comfort as best they could. "It's okay to be sad," Trill said, patting his arm. "Teacher Sess says sadness needs to come out sometimes." When Daewon had composed himself, he wiped his eyes. "Thank you. I think I needed that." Another tremor shook the tunnel, but this one was different. It felt like machinery rather than the storm. Daewon listened carefully. Yes, there it was again. A rhythmic vibration, drilling equipment. "They're coming," he said, hope flooding through him. "The rescue team is coming." The hatchlings chirped excitedly. Ski tried to stand, but her legs were too weak. Daewon picked her up gently, holding her close. The drilling sounds grew louder over the next hour. Voices called out, muffled by rock and distance. Daewon called back, his voice hoarse from hours of talking in the cold air. "We're here. 3 hatchlings and 1 adult." The response was immediate. "Daewon? Is that you?" It was Crix's voice, distorted but recognizable. Relief washed over Daewon. "Yes. The hatchlings are alive but cold and weak. Ski needs immediate medical attention. Hold on. We're clearing the collapse now." The weight was agonizing. The hatchlings were shivering despite being wrapped in the thermal blanket. Daewon's own core temperature had dropped. He was having trouble feeling his fingers and toes, but they were so close to rescue now. They just had to hold on a little longer. Pip looked up at Daewon. "When we get out, will you come visit us? I want Father to meet you." "If he wants to meet me, I will," Daewon promised. "He will," Trill said with certainty. "You saved us." "We're not out yet," Daewon cautioned, though he smiled. The drilling stopped. Now came the sound of rocks being moved, shifted carefully to avoid another collapse. A thin beam of light pierced through the darkness, stronger and brighter than Daewon's failing lamp. "We've got a hole through." Crix's voice was clearer now. "We're making it bigger. Stand back." Daewon moved the hatchlings to the safest corner of their small space. More rocks were removed. The hole grew larger. Fresh air flowed in, warmer than the tunnel air. Finally, the opening was big enough for someone to fit through. Crix came through first, his insectoid form suited for tight spaces. His multiple eyes took in the scene. The exhausted human, the 3 small hatchlings, the destroyed heater, the sparse supplies. "Medical team, get ready," Crix called back. The hatchlings are hypothermic. Then Vel pushed through the opening, his feathers disheveled and his eyes wild with worry and hope. He saw his 3 children and made a sound that was part sob, part cry of relief. "Papa!" Trill and Pip called together. Vel rushed to them, gathering them in his wings. He checked them frantically, running his hands over their small bodies, making sure they were real and alive. Ski was still in Daewon's arms, too weak to move on her own. Vel looked at Daewon, at his daughter held carefully in the human's arms. For a moment their eyes met. Then Vel gently took Ski, cradling her against his chest. "Thank you," Vel said, his voice breaking. "Thank you for finding them. Thank you for keeping them alive." Daewon nodded, suddenly too tired to speak. Now that the hatchlings were safe, the adrenaline that had kept him going was fading. The cold he'd been ignoring settled into his bones. More rescue workers came through the opening. A medical team immediately began treating the hatchlings. Warm blankets appeared. A doctor, a reptilian specialist, examined each of the young avians quickly and efficiently. "They'll be fine," the doctor pronounced. Mild hypothermia, some dehydration, but no permanent damage. They were kept warm enough. Another medic approached Daewon. "Your turn. Let me check you." Only then did Daewon realize how much he was shivering. His lips were blue and his skin was cold to the touch. The medic wrapped him in a thermal blanket and checked his vital signs. "Moderate hypothermia," the medic said with concern. "You gave them your jacket and your food, didn't you?" "They needed it more," Daewon said through chattering teeth. "Stubborn human," the medic muttered, but there was admiration in the tone. "Let's get you to the medical bay." As they prepared to evacuate the tunnel, Pip broke free from the medical team and rushed to Daewon. The small hatchling hugged his leg, the only part he could reach. "You're my favorite human," Pip declared. Despite his exhaustion and cold, Daewon smiled. "You're my favorite hatchling." The rescue team helped everyone through the opening and back through the cleared tunnels. The storm had finally passed. The colony's lights seemed bright after so many hours in darkness. Personnel lined the corridors, watching as the rescue team emerged with their precious cargo. The medical bay was busy when they arrived. Doctors and nurses moved efficiently between beds, treating various minor injuries from the storm. The hatchlings were placed together in one section, warming blankets and heat lamps surrounding them. Vel refused to leave their side, perching on a stool between their beds. Daewon was taken to a separate area. The medical team worked quickly, treating his hypothermia with warm intravenous fluids and heated blankets. A human doctor, one of the few at the colony, examined him thoroughly. "You're lucky," the doctor said. "Another few hours and we'd be looking at serious tissue damage. As it is, you'll make a full recovery." "The hatchlings?" Daewon asked. "All 3 are doing well. Ski will need to stay a day or 2 for observation, but she'll be fine. You kept them warm enough." The doctor paused. "That was a brave thing you did. Foolish maybe, but brave." Word of what had happened spread through the colony like wildfire. Crix's team had recorded everything with their helmet cameras. The footage showed Daewon in the tunnel. The 3 hatchlings wrapped in his jacket and blanket pressed close to him for warmth. In one frame, all 3 were asleep, curled up on his lap while he kept watch. That image captured something that words couldn't express. It spread through the colony's network, then beyond to other stations and settlements. The solitary human who'd risked everything for 3 alien children he barely knew. The hatchling sleeping peacefully on his lap, trusting him completely. Yuri came to visit Daewon in the medical bay. She sat in the chair beside his bed, her expression a mix of exasperation and respect. "You violated about 15 safety protocols," she said. "I know. You could have died down there. I know that too." Yuri was quiet for a moment. "The whole colony is talking about you. Actually, stations as far as the outer rim are talking about you. That image of the hatchlings asleep on your lap is everywhere." Daewon groaned. "I didn't do it for attention." "I know you didn't, that's why it matters." Yuri leaned forward. "We've been trying to build relationships with the other species here, to show them that humans can be trusted partners. You did more for human reputation in one night than all our diplomatic efforts combined." "I just did what anyone should do," Daewon protested. "But most beings wouldn't have. They would have reported it and waited for someone else to handle it. You went yourself into danger for children that weren't your species." Yuri smiled. "That's worth recognizing." After Yuri left, other visitors came. Colleagues he'd barely spoken to stopped by to express their admiration. Species he'd never interacted with came to thank him. It was overwhelming for someone who preferred solitude, but the visit that mattered most came on the second day. Vel arrived with the 3 hatchlings. Ski was still weak but able to walk with help. All 3 wore fresh clothes and had been groomed, their feathers smooth and bright. "We wanted to thank you properly," Vel said. His feathers were arranged in a formal pattern, indicating he was about to perform an important ritual. The medical staff cleared space. Other patients and visitors gathered to watch, sensing something significant was about to happen. Vel stood before Daewon's bed. The 3 hatchlings arranged themselves beside their father. Then Vel began to speak in his native language, the words flowing like song. A translator device provided the meaning in common language. "Before witnesses and the spirits of our ancestors, I declare Daewon of Earth to be clutch guardian to my family. He risked his life for my hatchlings without thought of reward. He kept them warm when he himself was cold. He fed them when he himself was hungry. He stayed awake so they could sleep safely. He is worthy of the highest honor our people can bestow." Vel produced 3 feathers, deep blue and beautiful. He placed them in Daewon's hands. "These are from my crest given freely. They mark you as family. My home is your home. My flock is your flock. In our tradition, a clutch guardian is as close as blood, bound by choice rather than birth." The watching crowd murmured in surprise. Many had never seen this ceremony performed, especially not for someone outside the species. Daewon looked at the feathers, then at Vel and the hatchlings. He was overwhelmed by the gesture. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll visit us," Pip urged. "Say you'll tell us more stories." "Say you'll teach us about Earth," Trill added. Ski just held out her small arms for a hug. Daewon carefully got out of bed and knelt down so she could reach him. She wrapped her tiny arms around his neck. "You're the warmest," she whispered. The other 2 hatchlings joined the hug. Vel watched with obvious emotion, his eyes bright with unshed tears. When the ceremony concluded, the medical staff insisted Daewon get back in bed to rest. But before he did, Grandmother Cree, the elderly avian who'd been in the shelter with Vel, approached. "I've lived 80 seasons," she said, her voice carrying the weight of years. "I've seen many species and many individuals. What you did reminded me that the universe is full of surprises. We thought we knew what humans were. You showed us we were wrong to make such quick judgments. I'm just one human," Daewon said. "That's how change starts. One person, one action." She patted his hand with her wing. "You've given the humans here a gift. You've opened doors that were closed. What they do with that opportunity is up to them." Over the following days, things shifted in the colony. Humans who had kept to themselves began joining communal activities. Other species who had avoided human workers started conversations. The invisible walls that had separated the groups began to crack. Yuri offered Daewon a promotion and new quarters in the residential section instead of the maintenance level. Larger rooms closer to the communal areas. "I want you more visible," she explained. "You've become a bridge between humans and other species." "That's valuable." Daewon hesitated. The old him would have refused, preferring solitude. But something had changed in that dark tunnel. Holding those frightened hatchlings, telling them stories, promising them they'd be safe. It had reminded him of something he'd forgotten. Connection mattered. Being alone was a choice, not a necessity. "I'll accept," he said, "on one condition." "What's that?" "I want to help establish better protocols for searching for lost personnel, especially children." What happened shouldn't happen again, Yuri agreed immediately. Daewon's new quarters were twice the size of his old ones. He had a living area, a sleeping area, and even a small space for guests. The first guest to visit were 3 excited hatchlings and their father. "It's so big," Pip exclaimed, running around the room. "Much bigger than our nest," Trill agreed. Ski, still recovering, sat on Daewon's couch and looked at him expectantly. "Story time?" Daewon laughed. It was a sound his colleagues weren't used to hearing. "What story do you want to hear?" "Tell us about the ocean again," Ski requested. "The one with the big waves." So Daewon told them about Earth's oceans, about surfing and swimming and ships that crossed vast distances. Vel listened too, fascinated by the descriptions of a world so different from their own. When the hatchlings finally left, tired but happy, Vel lingered at the door. "They ask about you constantly," he said. "When can we visit Daewon? Is Daewon working today? Can Daewon come to our nest for evening meal?" I'd like that, Day One said. Visiting for a meal, I mean. Tomorrow, then. 6 cycles past daylight. Vel paused. You gave me my children back. I can never repay that debt. You don't owe me anything, Day One said firmly. I did what was right. That's why the debt exists. Because you did it without expecting anything in return. Vel touched the feathers he'd given Day One, now displayed on the wall. You're family now. In our tradition, that's permanent. After Vel left, Day One stood in his new quarters looking at the feathers on his wall. Through the window, he could see other parts of the colony. People moving about their evening routines. The lights of the residential sections warm and welcoming. He thought about Jiho. About the years spent running from the pain of that loss. About the isolation he'd wrapped himself in like armor. The hatchlings had cracked that armor. Their simple trust and acceptance had reminded him of something important. Life was about connections, about caring for others and letting others care for you, about being part of something larger than yourself. His comm beeped. A message from the Learning Center. They wanted to know if he'd be interested in teaching the younglings about Earth and human culture. A cultural exchange program. Day One smiled and sent back his acceptance. The next evening he went to Vel's nest for dinner. It was located in the avian section of the residential wing, designed with perches and elevated sleeping areas. The 3 hatchlings greeted him with excited chirps, pulling him inside to show him their favorite things. The meal was simple but delicious, adapted to be safe for both their species and his. They sat together on cushions on the floor, the hatchlings taking turns telling Day One about their day at the Learning Center. Teacher Sess says you're going to teach us about Earth, Pip said excitedly. Starting next week? Day One confirmed. Will you teach us that song? Trill asked. The one you hummed in the tunnel? It's a lullaby from my home country, Day One said. I can teach you the words if you like. After dinner, as the hatchlings were preparing for sleep, Ski climbed into Day One's lap just as she had in the tunnel. She yawned widely, showing